My name is Maya Lauren Whitfield, and I'm 27. Here's what I learned the morning my phone lit up with 47 missed calls. Sometimes you don't wake up to an alarm. You wake up to a decision that's already chosen you. It didn't start with a fight. It started with a text. "You'll pay half my rent until I'm on my feet," my older sister Amber wrote. No please. No question mark. Just a demand delivered like a utility bill, due upon receipt. I stared at the screen long enough to see my reflection in it. Tired, puffy-eyed, still wearing yesterday's sweats. For nearly a year, I had been the family's moving wallet. Groceries, utility bills, car repairs, surprise fees I'd never heard of but somehow was responsible for. I covered it all. Not because anyone asked gently, because it was understood. My dad lost his job just before the holidays last year. I wired them $1,500 without thinking. The way people hand over their jackets when a storm rolls in. That first transfer felt like love. The next 20 felt like oxygen siphoned out of my lungs. I typed 2 words back. Absolutely not. For a full heartbeat, I didn't breathe. Then the message sent. Blue bubble slipping away like a stone across a lake. 10 minutes later, Mom. Selfish. You're dead to us until you do your part. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the absurdity finally clicked into place like a lock turning. I had spent months bending myself into shapes that didn't exist, and the first time I stood up straight, I was declared a ghost. I didn't respond. I opened my banking app. The auto pay for their internet, canceled. The car insurance, gone. The $500 monthly emergency transfer, deleted. One by one, I pulled the wires that tethered me to their problems. My fingers shook, but it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. It was the sound of my life unclasping. Silence swallowed the apartment. The kind of silence that can be sanctuary or trap, depending on which pocket you slide into. I went to bed with my phone face down for the first time in months. At 7:42 a.m., the phone started buzzing like a trapped insect. By the time I stepped out of the shower, there were 47 missed calls. Mom, Dad, Amber. Even Uncle Steve, who I hadn't seen since my cousin's graduation, left a voicemail. I pressed play on Dad's because he's always been better at pretending calm. "We're in trouble here, kiddo. You can't just walk away like this. Your sister needs you." My grown sister, whose most stable commitment in 5 years has been to her nail technician, needed me more than I needed to pay my own rent. I put the phone down, turned it off, left it off for 48 hours. He came over that night. Evan, my boyfriend. We've been shaky ever since he told me it felt like he was dating the ghost of a girl who only showed up between crisis wires and late-night guilt calls. He stood in my doorway holding a paper bag and an apology he wasn't sure he had the right to deliver. "I brought dinner," he said softly. "And if you want me to go after, I'll go." We ate sitting on the floor because the table was covered in neat stacks of bills and closed-loop bank tabs. For a while, we didn't talk. When we did, it hurt. "I can't do this," he said finally, the words brittle. "Not like this. I want a future I can see." I stared at the carpet fibers, at the way a stray thread curled like a question mark. I didn't beg him to stay. Not because I didn't love him, but because I finally understood what I had lost trying to keep everyone else from falling apart. After he left, the quiet didn't feel like punishment. It felt like the moment after a fever breaks. By the second day, when the panic in my chest began to imitate peace, I did the hardest, smartest thing I could think of. I asked for backup. Jenna and Marcus, my cousins, the only family who hadn't tried to turn me into an ATM with feelings. Marcus answered on the first ring. "I was waiting for this," he said, not unkindly. "Tell me everything." I told him about the sister rent text, the dead to us message, the transfers I pulled like stitches out of a wound that never healed. I told him I might have lost my boyfriend because I didn't know how to stop bleeding into my family's hands. "That's insane," he said. "You've been carrying them while they're kicking the ladder." Jenna chimed in via text. "If you want, we'll help. You're not alone." Those 4 words weighed less than a feather and more than a promise. That's when the banging started. I was rinsing a mug when the door rattled under Amber's fist. "Maya, open up! I'm serious!" Her voice threaded anger with something more fragile. Fear or entitlement. Sometimes it's the same color if you don't look closely. I didn't answer. The peephole showed a blurred version of my sister I barely recognized. expensive sweatshirt, lashes thick as moth wings, phone in hand like a baton. She knocked again, then again, a rhythm meant to force itself under my skin. I texted Marcus, she's here. 2 minutes later, we're on our way, don't open. I sat on the couch, hands clasped, listening to my own heart as if it belonged to someone else. I thought about every Saturday night I ate instant noodles so I could wire money Sunday morning. About the promotions I turned down because Mom needed a ride, because Dad needed a co-signer, because Amber needed a buffer between I'll be fine and I never said that. The deadbolt trembled, then stopped. Silence again, the kind that tests you. By the time Jenna and Marcus arrived, the hallway was empty. We stood in the living room like soldiers in a quiet after battle, and I said it out loud for the first time. I'm drawing a line. Lions in the sand. Marcus nodded. Then let's make it stone. We made a plan the way you do when you've decided to stop negotiating with chaos. Step 1. Cut off all financial access. Change every password. Cancel every recurring payment. Set alerts for attempted withdrawals. Step 2. Draw emotional boundaries. No more answering guilt with explanations. Silence is a response. Step 3. Keep witnesses. Jenna and Marcus looped in on everything so gaslighting had nowhere to live. By morning, I went full lockdown. New passwords with phrases that made me smile. Maya is not a debt plan. Oxygen is mine. Scheduled transfers, gone. Alerts, enabled. Every dollar that used to leak out for family emergencies rerouted into the unglamorous joy of paying down my own debts. Amber retaliated with speed only entitlement gives. Where's my money, Maya? I didn't answer. I took a screenshot, filed it in a folder labeled Archive, Proof I'm Not Crazy. Mom's message came longer, like she thought more words could cradle me back into place. We raised you better than this. You don't turn your back on family. Your father is disappointed beyond words. Disappointed is what you say when the product doesn't arrive on time. Dad called 3 times. His voicemails choosing the solemn register of a man asking a bank for a grace period. He wanted a family meeting. He wanted reason. Reason had been exiled the day my love became their ledger. That evening, Amber returned with volume. I opened the door this time, with Jenna and Marcus behind me like anchors. We're done, I said, calmly. There's nothing to discuss. Amber blinked, like I'd spoken a language she didn't know. The phone in her hand lit up with Mom calling. I answered and hit speaker. You're destroying the family, Mom cried. You can't abandon us. I looked at Jenna, at Marcus, at the girl I used to be, hovering like heat over asphalt. You've had years to rely on me, I said. I did everything I could. I'm done. Amber's mouth trembled, then flattened into a hard line. She left. The building sighed after the stairwell door slammed. Mom hung up. Relief came like a tide, not a trumpet. It didn't announce victory. It simply washed the grit away from my teeth. But relief is not safety. Boundaries aren't a fortress until you keep them. That night, I ate pasta I wanted, watched a show I chose, paid a bill. With money that would have vanished by sunrise in another life, I sat in the stillness and listened for panic. It didn't come. What came instead was a thought so simple it felt like a prayer. I know who I was before they broke me down. I'm getting her back. Morning arrives with a gray, rinsed light like the world got scrubbed overnight and left to drip dry. I make coffee, not because I'm awake, but because the ritual steadies my hands. The notifications on my phone are a scrolling marquee of outrage, missed calls, voicemails, paragraphs from Mom that start with sweetheart and end like legal threats. I do not open them. I touch the mug for warmth and let the steam fog the part of me that still believes peace requires permission. Lockdown isn't dramatic. It's meticulous. It's me at the kitchen table with a notebook and a pen, listing every place my life leaks. Bank logins, retail cards, cloud storage, a dusty streaming app Dad borrowed to watch baseball. Passwords become sentences only I would write. Security questions stop being family trivia and start being private jokes with myself. Alerts ping for any attempt, any prod, any accidental login from a familiar home Wi-Fi. I am not barricading myself from love, only from extraction. Marcus texts a checklist with bullet points and timestamps. Jenna adds a column labeled Evidence. We aren't planning for a war so much as we're documenting the one that already happened. Screenshots drop into the shared folder like snow. Amber's, "Where's my money, Maya?" Mom's, "We sacrificed for you." Dad's, "We just need a little time." And then the guilt-laced classics. You'll understand when you have kids. Family is everything. Don't let outsiders divide us. Outsiders meaning Jenna and Marcus. Outsiders meaning anyone who won't co-sign our collapse. By noon, Amber moves to the stage she prefers, public. She posts a story with white text on a black background. Some people love you until you need them, then they disappear. She tags no one, but our blood makes inference easy. Comments bloom like mold. A few mutuals send me screenshots. I do not reply. I drag, drop, file. The folder labeled archive, proof. I'm Not Crazy grows heavier, and with it, my spine straightens. There's a truth I haven't told anyone. The first time I paid a bill for them, I felt chosen. Dad's voice was raw. Mom sounded small. I was 26 and thought being needed meant being loved. I moved money like a magician pulling scarves from an endless sleeve. I missed dinners, canceled plans, pushed back a certification exam because we're in trouble here, kiddo. The night I skipped that exam was also the night Evan waited at a restaurant until the candles guttered out. I arrived breathless, said, "I'm sorry," 6 different ways, and believed each one. He smiled like forgiveness and told the server it was okay. It was not okay. We pretended it was because that's what you do when you decide a small hurt. Now is the price of not making a big hurt later. Small hurts compound interest. Eventually, you don't recognize the math. Around 3, the door buzzes. Marcus and Jenna with grocery bags and a whiteboard the size of a modest TV. We set it against the wall and draw 3 columns: financial, emotional, narrative. Financial, Marcus says, uncapping a marker like a surgeon with a scalpel. Access revoked. Alert set. Emergency fund for you, not them. Emotional, Jenna continues. No responses to guilt. We'll be your echo chamber if you need to hear your own sanity out loud. I point to the 3rd column. Narrative? Jenna grins. Amber's playing to the crowd. We don't fight backstage. If she lies in public, we show receipts in public, but on your timing, not hers. On cue, my phone lights up again. Mom, we didn't raise you to be cruel. Your sister's going through a really tough time. There's an attachment, a picture of Amber on a couch, eyes red, a blanket drawn up like penance. The caption reads, "Please help your family." I stare at the image, at the stagecraft, the props, the lighting, and something inside me clicks into a cooler gear. Save it, I say. We keep building our case. No replies. We work the rest of the afternoon, slicing through logistics like vines. I call my building's management to revoke all spare key permissions and log the unwelcome entry from last week as a security incident. I buy a small safe and put my passport inside. I move my turntable off the low console and onto a shelf where fists can't land easily. These are not the gestures of fear. They are the rituals of respect. For myself, for my things, for the hours I trade to own them. At dusk, the sky bruises purple. I step to the window and catch my reflection. A woman who looks like she's been underwater for a long time and only now remembers the shape of air. Evan texts, "Thinking of you. No pressure to talk. I'm here. A month ago, I would have read it as a lifeline. Today, I read it as what it is. Kindness without a hook." I type, "Thank you," and set the phone down. Boundaries are easier with enemies. They are an art with people you love. Night falls, and the building quiets. From the hallway, footsteps pause outside my door, soft, uncertain. A shadow trembles under the seam of light. No knock, just the sound of someone not deciding. The floorboard creaks, then recedes. I feel the echo of it in my ribs. Part of me wants to fling the door open and deliver a speech that would trend by breakfast. Another part, the wiser one, knows a boundary whispered to yourself is stronger than a manifesto screamed at a wall. We eat takeout around the whiteboard. Marcus tells a story about a client who mistook an invoice for a love letter. Jenna snorts rice. I laugh for the first time in days, and the sound startles me. The laughs drift into quiet. The quiet drifts into a memory. December last year. Dad calling me from the parking lot so Mom doesn't hear the break in his voice. We're short for the mortgage, just for now. My chest ached like it was trying to grow a second heart. I sent the money and told myself I would be paid back in the currency of gratitude. Here's the exchange rate they don't teach you. The minute you become essential, your needs become optional. People don't repay oxygen. I write that on the whiteboard. I am not oxygen. Jenna underlines it twice. At 11, the social media shifts from vague booking to precision. Amber posts a photo of us from 3 years ago at a fair, cotton candy, Ferris wheel, her head on my shoulder. Some people change when they think they're better than you. The comments range from confetti to knives. Someone writes, "Tag her." Amber replies with a single drop of blood emoji. Marcus raises an eyebrow. "She's fishing." I nod. We keep our timing. Here's the thing about power. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like holding a glass of water with steady hands after weeks of sloshing. It feels like choosing when to sleep and discovering your body remembers how. By midnight, my mind, which has been a strobe light for months, finally dims. The next morning, I wake before my alarm. The world outside is a watered painting. I run, slow and steady, 3 laps around the block. When I return, there's a note under my door in Mom's handwriting. Family meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. Your father is sick with worry. No address, just the presumption I know where to go. I place the note on the counter and make oatmeal. The spoon scrapes the bowl like a small metronome. I do not text. I do not call. At lunch, Jenna and I craft a statement. Not a clapback, not a thread. A simple post with 3 images. Amber's demand for rent, Mom's dead to us, and a cropped bank screen showing the dates my transfers began and ended, identifying details blurred. Caption. Sometimes love gets mistaken for obligation. I'm choosing health and boundaries. I wish everyone healing. We schedule it for evening, 5 minutes after the family meeting start time. If they wanted theater, they should have booked a better director. At 6:58 p.m., my phone buzzes with a location ping from Mom, our childhood house. I don't go. At 7:05 p.m., our post goes live. The reaction is immediate, a hush that hums. People who knew but didn't know begin to know. Private messages trickle in. Old teachers, a former neighbor, even the manager at the diner where Amber shorted tips and I overpaid to compensate. Proud of you. Took guts. Here if you need a witness. I don't want witnesses anymore, but it's good to know they exist. At 7:19 p.m., Dad calls, straight to voicemail. At 7:22 p.m., Amber posts a blank square. At 7:23 p.m., she deletes it. At 7:26 p.m., she texts me, "You didn't have to embarrass us." I stare at the words until they blur, then send back the only sentence I owe. Do not come to my apartment again. I block her number. My hands tremble afterward, but the tremor reads like release. I end the night the way I began the day, with a list. Not of debts, not of tasks, of choices. What I am willing to give, what I will not. In the margin I write, silence can be sanctuary. It can also be a trap. Mine will be a door I open from the inside. I turn off the lights. The apartment exhales. For the first time in a long time, I sleep as if my future isn't on layaway. The air that morning carried a strange stillness, the kind that feels like a warning whispered through walls. I had slept 9 hours straight, a record, and woke with the illusion that peace could be permanent. Then I saw the door. The lock wasn't broken, just tired, scratched around the edges, the way metal gets when someone doesn't know how to use a key that doesn't belong to them. My heart tightened. I pushed the door open. Silence, then chaos. The living room looked like a crime scene staged by someone who'd run out of time. My couch cushions were gutted, seams split open like wounds. My record player, the one thing I'd bought just for myself, was flipped on its side. My laptop lay open, cracked screen glowing faintly like a dying ember. And my records, my carefully collected vinyls that had traveled with me through every move and breakup and heartbreak, were shattered across the floor in a black and silver mosaic. My hands started shaking, but not with fear, with recognition. This wasn't random vandalism. This was Amber's chaos, rearranged into art. I knew before I checked that the spare key was gone. Mom had kept one, just in case. I'd asked for it back twice. She'd changed the subject both times. By the time I found the note taped to the fridge, you left us no choice. My hands had stopped shaking. I called Marcus first. He answered before the first ring finished. "Tell me where you are." "Home," I said, my voice flat. She was here. 10 minutes later, he and Jenna burst in, breathless, faces flickering between rage and disbelief. Marcus stood in the center of the wreckage, jaw tight. "We should call the cops," he said, "right now." I wanted to. I really did. But something in me hesitated. "No," I said softly. "That's what she wants. A show. I'm not giving her one." Jenna stared at me. "She destroyed your things." "I know," I said, "but this isn't about things." Because deep down, I understood what this was. Amber didn't break my records for revenge. She did it to drag me back into the noise, the panic, the guilt, the cycle of cleanup and apology that had defined our family for years. She wanted me to react. Instead, I started taking photos. Every corner, every tear, every shard of vinyl. Marcus followed my lead, documenting quietly. We logged the time, the date, even the angle of light through the blinds. When the evidence folder was full, I sat on the couch and whispered, "Okay." Jenna looked at me, puzzled. "Okay, what?" "Okay, she's lost control. That means I've won the first round." We spent the rest of the day cleaning. I swept glass while Jenna vacuumed and Marcus fixed the chair leg that had snapped. Every small repair felt symbolic, like gluing myself back together. Midway through taping a torn photo frame, my phone buzzed. Amber. I let it ring once, then twice. The voicemail came in seconds later. "Maya, I didn't mean to. I just wanted you to listen. Mom said we should talk face to face, but you locked us out. Please, just call me. Please." Her voice trembled, part fear, part guilt, part performance. I could hear Mom in the background saying something muffled like, "Tell her we love her." Then a text followed. "We're sorry. Please forgive us." I stared at the message. My thumb hovered above the keyboard, the same way it had 1,000 times before. I wanted to write back something final, something scathing, something that proved I had the last word, but I didn't. Instead, I set the phone face down and went back to cleaning. Marcus watched me quietly. "You're really not going to answer?" I shook my head. "No, not until my piece stops shaking." By sunset, the apartment was almost restored. A few scratches on the floor, a replaced bulb, a pile of broken records I couldn't bring myself to throw away yet. I sat cross-legged on the rug, exhausted but strangely grounded. "You know," Jenna said gently, "forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in." "I know," I said. "I'm forgiving them so I can stop fighting the ghosts." Marcus smiled faintly. "You sound like someone who's done being hunted." That night, I lit a single candle and ate dinner from the same chipped bowl I'd used since college. Simple, quiet, mine. For once, the silence didn't echo. It just existed. A few days later, Evan came by. I hadn't seen him since that night he left. He brought coffee and a hesitant smile. "I heard about all this," he said, glancing around the room. "I didn't want to intrude, but I couldn't not check on you." He stepped inside slowly, eyes lingering on the taped seams of the couch. "You're handling this better than anyone I know would." I laughed softly. "That's one way to say I'm numb." He looked at me. "No, you're awake." We sat for a while, not touching, just talking. He told me about how his ex-girlfriend, Clara, used to control every part of his life until he finally left, and how it took him months to realize leaving didn't mean healing. "I see that in you," he said quietly. "You're doing the healing part now." It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was recognition. Two people who had finally stopped apologizing for breathing. When he left, I walked him to the door. For the first time, I noticed my reflection in the hallway mirror, hair messy, eyes tired, but steady. I looked like someone who could survive her own story. That night, I sent a single text to Jenna and Marcus. I forgave them. She replied, "Good, now forgive yourself too." It was the first message that made me cry. The next morning, I woke early. No messages, no calls, no drama, just a still phone and the hum of the fridge. I made breakfast slowly, almost ceremonially, pouring orange juice without spilling a drop. I was learning how to move without panic, how to exist without waiting for the next demand. By afternoon, a thought began to take root, small but insistent. Forgiveness wasn't the end. It was just the break between battles. Because people like Amber don't surrender when you say no. They retreat, they plan. And somewhere deep down, I knew she wasn't done. I could almost feel it in the air, that calm before the next storm. I didn't have to wait long for the next storm. It didn't roar this time. It whispered. Amber started small, like she always did. A few posts online, a tearful voice note accidentally sent to mutual friends, a photo of her crying on the porch with the caption, "Some people just enjoy watching their family fall apart." For a few days, I ignored it. But shame has a way of lingering, even when it's unjustified. The notifications kept pinging, screenshots, questions, silent sympathies from people I hadn't spoken to in years. The narrative was slipping from my hands, just as it had all my life, rewritten by whoever shouted loudest. That's when Marcus said, "We need to make a statement." We gathered at my apartment again, the three of us. Jenna sat cross-legged on the rug with her laptop, scrolling through Amber's timeline. Marcus leaned against the window, arms crossed. "She's trying to spin this like you abandoned them," Jenna said. "If we stay quiet, that becomes the truth." I looked around the room, the once ruined space I had slowly reclaimed. Clean shelves, a repaired chair, fresh flowers on the windowsill. "Then we don't stay quiet," I said. We spent hours building a post that wasn't revenge. It was record-keeping. Facts, not fury. Screenshots of the rent demand. "Moms, you're dead to us," text. My transaction history showing every dollar I'd sent for a full year, all identifying info blurred, names intact. At the top, a caption. "Family can be love or leverage. I finally learned the difference." Jenna hit post. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the notifications started. Comments, messages, shares, an avalanche of empathy from people who'd once whispered behind my back. Some confessed they'd been manipulated the same way. Others apologized for believing Amber's version. Amber didn't respond directly, but the silence from her camp said enough. That night, I opened one of the few surviving records from the wreckage, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors. The vinyl had a long scratch down its side, but played anyway, a soft static underneath the melody. The crackles sounded like resilience. As the music filled the room, Evan knocked gently. I hadn't expected him. "I saw your post," he said, standing in the doorway holding 2 mugs of coffee. "You didn't hold back." "I didn't lie either," I said. He nodded, stepping inside. "I know. That's what I admire about you. You don't perform your pain. You process it." We sat on the floor, backs against the couch. He glanced at the record player and smiled faintly. "That song, Go Your Own Way, seems fitting." I smirked. "Little on the nose, but yeah." He hesitated. "You know, I wasn't fair before. I wanted you to choose me when you couldn't even choose yourself yet." "Maybe we both needed distance," I said. "Boundaries don't have to be walls. Sometimes they're bridges that take time to build." He looked at me then, not with guilt, but with something gentler. "Can I start building again?" I didn't say yes, I just smiled and said, "One step at a time." For the first time, there was no imbalance in the room. No one rescuing, no one pleading. Just 2 people existing in the same quiet. Days passed. Mom sent a short message. "We need to talk." No drama, no demands, just words that almost sounded human. I didn't reply, but for once, it didn't sting. Instead, I turned my attention back to my own life, paid my bills, cooked dinners I actually enjoyed, resumed projects I'd abandoned. Jenna helped me repaint the living room, a soft sage green. We joked that it was the color of recovery. But even as peace started to settle, I knew Amber's silence wasn't surrender. And I was right. One evening, I came home from work and saw her standing by the building gate, makeup perfect, eyes red, a performance rehearsed. "Maya, please," she said as I approached. "I'm not here to fight. I miss you." There was a time when those words would have melted me. Not anymore. "I miss the sister you used to be," I said calmly. "The one who didn't see me as a solution." Her lips trembled. "You think I wanted any of this?" "I think you liked the control it gave you," I said, "and now you don't know who you are without it." Tears filled her eyes. Real this time. "Mom's sick," she whispered. "She's been crying every night." I met her gaze. Then she should call her doctor, not her daughter's conscience. Her mouth opened, then closed. She nodded once, a tiny broken gesture, and turned to leave. I didn't follow her. Back upstairs, I locked the door and exhaled a breath that felt like it had waited years to leave. The old me would have crumbled under guilt. The new me recognized manipulation dressed as grief. I texted Marcus and Jenna, boundary held, barely. Marcus replied with a fist emoji. Jenna sent a heart. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and watched the city glow beneath me. My post had stopped trending, but I didn't care. The point wasn't to win. It was to tell the truth, out loud for once. Amber's final message came 2 days later. You'll regret this one day. Family doesn't last forever. I read it twice, then, without hesitation, I pressed block. No explanation, no final paragraph, just silence. Mine this time, and it was enough. That evening, Evan dropped by with takeout. We didn't talk about Amber or Mom or the posts. We talked about everything else. Music, travel, art. For the first time in forever, the future didn't feel like a battlefield. Before he left, he said, "You look different." "I feel different," I replied. "I finally stopped asking for peace from people who profit from my pain." He smiled. That's power. As the door closed behind him, I turned the record over. The next song started with a static hum that bloomed into harmony. It felt like closure. 6 months later, the light in my apartment looked different. Softer somehow, as if the walls themselves had exhaled all the old noise. The plants on the windowsill had finally started to bloom again. Green proof that neglect isn't the end of anything. Life wasn't dramatic anymore. It was peaceful, almost ordinary. And that, I learned, was the truest kind of miracle. Some mornings, I'd wake before sunrise just to sit in the quiet. No buzzing phone, no guilt messages disguised as love, just the hum of the city and the warmth of my coffee mug in both hands. Silence, once my punishment, had become my prayer. Evan and I had grown close again, but slower this time, steadier. We weren't rushing toward labels or pretending to fix what couldn't be fixed overnight. We met each other where we stood, two people who had learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. He'd stay over some nights, we'd make dinner, half talking, half laughing, and it felt normal. Beautifully, boringly normal. Then one morning, a letter arrived. An actual letter, in pen, with an out-of-state postmark. I almost didn't open it, assuming it was another reach from Mom or Amber, but the handwriting was unfamiliar, slanted and neat, like someone who still cared about words. It was from Ethan, my cousin on Dad's side. We hadn't spoken since we were kids, but he'd seen my post through Jenna and wanted me to know that I wasn't crazy, that I'd done what half the family wished they could do. "You standing up for yourself gave the rest of us permission," he wrote. "You didn't break the family, Maya. You just stopped letting it break you." I read it twice, then a third time. By the end, my eyes were wet, but not from sadness. A few weeks later, Ethan visited. We met at a small cafe downtown, sunlight spilling across the table like honey. He told me about his own struggles, about saying no to his parents' endless expectations, about the guilt that came after. We talked for hours, not once mentioning Amber or Mom by name, just the pattern, the inheritance of manipulation, the quiet bravery it took to unlearn it. When he left, he hugged me and said, "You know, you didn't just change your life. You shifted the story for all of us." That night, I walked home under a sky full of low stars, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone in my bloodline. Weeks passed like that, gently, gracefully. I focused on the simple things: work, cooking, painting, small weekend trips with Marcus and Jenna. We built new traditions: movie nights, bad karaoke, random acts of joy that didn't require apologies. Every once in a while, Mom would send a text, a photo of the backyard, a recipe I used to love. Nothing manipulative, just small. I didn't respond, but I didn't block her either. I had nothing to prove anymore. My silence wasn't war, it was peace. Then, one Friday evening, my building manager called. "You've got a package in the office, no sender listed." Inside was a square cardboard box wrapped in brown paper. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside were 3 vinyl records, rare ones, the exact same titles Amber had destroyed. Fleetwood Mac, Nina Simone, the Beatles' White Album, each in perfect condition, sealed, untouched. No note, no signature, just my name, written carefully across the top in familiar cursive. Maybe it was Jenna, maybe Marcus, maybe even Mom trying to say sorry without words. I didn't need to know. I just placed them carefully on the shelf beside the repaired record player, the one that still hummed softly when the needle dropped. That night, I played the first track, Nina Simone's "I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free." The sound was pure, alive. The kind of music that fills every corner of a room and dares the darkness to stay. Evan sat beside me on the couch, his arm resting lightly behind me. You know, he said quietly, it's kind of poetic. The same thing they tried to destroy came back to you. I smiled. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Things coming back, not as they were, but better. He nodded. So what now? I looked around the room. The plants, the photos, the quiet. Now, I live. I build. I protect my peace like it's sacred. Because it is. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant fireflies. Inside, the music played on, steady and sure. Months later, when people asked about my family, I no longer flinched. I didn't tell the whole story, just the truth that mattered. I love them, from far away. Because love, I realized, doesn't always mean access. Sometimes it means letting go. The final track ended, the room was still. For the first time in my life, the quiet stayed. Not as emptiness, but as freedom. I closed my eyes, breathed it in, and whispered to no one in particular, "This is mine." And it was.